GBS. Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back, viewer. You are watching GBS Morning Extra. It is the 7th day of the month of August 2019, and we're fresh in studio. And earlier, as I mentioned, we have in our studio today to help us discuss matters politics today, a very special guest. For the first time on GBS Morning Extra, Samuel Tawish. Karibu sana Tawish.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for honoring our invitation.
My pleasure.
How have you been?
Well, I've had a relatively nice morning, although it's a bit cold outside, but we are used with this weather in Nairobi, at least at this particular time in our year.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Now, Samuel Tawish will be helping us to discuss matters politics, but first, before we get into that, the betting companies last week told the Senate Justice, Legal and Human Rights Committee at Parliament buildings that the Kenyan Revenue Authority have disobeyed a court order barring the taxman from interfering with the day-to-day running activities of the companies. Let's listen in to this report by Emmanuel Ouma.
The Kenya Revenue Authority has found itself on the receiving end for initiating the freezing of bank accounts belonging to some of the betting firms despite a court order allowing them to continue operating. The firms, including SportPesa and Betin, told Parliament last week that the Kenya Revenue Authority went against a court order in pushing for the withdrawal of their licenses and freezing of their bank accounts. The High Court had issued an order barring the Betting Control and Licensing Board and other agents from stopping the betting firms from operating after June 30th, 2019. Betin Kenya told the Senate Committee on Justice, Legal and Human Rights that despite a High Court order against the Kenya Revenue Authority, various agency notices have been issued by the KRA against the companies freezing their bank accounts. The betting regulator on July 10, 2019 ordered all the telecommunication firms to stop processing payments for sports betting companies grounding their operations. BCLB said that 27 betting firms had yet to meet undisclosed licensing requirements. The firms argued that withholding a license is not a legally recognized measure of resolving a tax issue. SportPesa told the Senate that it was illegal for the Kenya Revenue Authority to stop their business operation pending determination of the amount of tax payable. It is a measure not recognized in the Tax Procedure Act, the guiding statute for tax administration. The dispute between the Kenya Revenue Authority and the betting firms centers on the amount and responsibility of the gambling firms in collecting 20% of winnings on behalf of the taxman. The Kenya Revenue Authority in a Friday statement said that it was in talks with the betting firms. Emmanuel Ouma, GBS TV.
Well, quite an interesting topic there. One would be left only to wonder. Some companies are being stopped from operating. Some companies are still operating, whereas the actual purpose of stopping these companies, some of the reasons that the government is giving for stopping these companies from operating is about curbing the rising menace of betting, because recently a report actually showed that a bigger percentage of young people who are committing suicide today have a history of betting and stuff like this. But we wait to see how that turns out. It's a matter before the court, and we believe that there will be a clear guideline on how to approach the matter. Now to our main story of the day. The Third Way Alliance party leader, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, has insisted that the petition to block county assemblies from debating on the Punguza Mzigo bill is politically sponsored and would not see the light of day. He noted that those people opposing the bill are the enemies of the people because they do not want all Kenyans to be in power in development through the increase of funds to the ward levels. Let's listen in to a bite by Ekuru Aukot earlier yesterday, which actually sets the basis for our discussion today with Samuel Tawish in studio.
the bill. The court injunction is a temporary injunction, but which is barring stopping rather the county assembly from debating and approving. My personal view is that the judge made a mistake. It was not the right decision in my view. You cannot stop or alter a constitutional timeline by way of a court order. Because where will this county assembly of Baringo today recover the 14 days that this judge has denied them? The constitution says once IBC places the bill, then the 3 months, the timeline of 3 months begin to count, run from then when the bill is tabled. So the judge, in my view, made a mistake. And you see, at the risk of sounding rather political, I feel the ruling was very unfair. Third Way Alliance Kenya has sued the Building Bridges Initiative. We filed a petition on the 13th of December last year. 7 months later, as we speak today here, we have been denied any temporary injunction. We have been denied any hearing of any of our application or even any of the petition itself. Yet this judge accommodates these people, the petitioners. They filed this suit. They serve us at 4:45 p.m. on Friday. And then he says, you only have 1 day to respond. Is it even possible? Look at even the presidential petition. The presidential petition in this country have a time frame of 14 days. You are given 3 days to respond. This judge, in his lack of wisdom, and you can quote me for saying that, says serve this petition, 4:45 p.m. we receive it, and he says you have 1 day to respond. So which was this 1 day? Courts don't work on Saturday. Nobody works on weekends. So on Monday we go there, and he says it's a mention to find out whether compliance. Speaker here has confirmed to me he has not received the petition. I'm the Speaker. Speaker has not received the petition. So if the Speaker of Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, we've been to Murang'a, we've been to Embu, we've been to Nyandarua, we've been to Garissa, Nairobi, all of them have not received the petition. They have not put in their responses. So on what basis then do you give such an order, which is very unconstitutional? So this is a politically sponsored petition, and they are now using the judiciary to actually play politics with the constitutional timelines. That's the unfortunate thing, but we are back in court on the 13th, and I'm sure.
Tawish, quite strong sentiments there by Ekuru Aukot, the party leader of the Third Way Alliance. Let me just put this very straight to you. Your take on the Punguza Mzigo initiative.
Very well, thank you so much, Timothy, and of course the viewer. I believe any Kenyan, including yourself, yes, really has a constitutional right. If you feel that there's something that has to be changed or even amended in our constitution, and you want that to be, of course, done through a popular initiative, which is a referendum, you can go and collect 1 million signatures. Yes. Present the same for debate and approval, at least by 24 counties. Mm-hmm. And then the same has to be approved by the bicameral houses, that is National Assembly and the Senate. Mm-hmm. That is what the law envisages, and there's nothing we can do about it. Sure. As for Ekuru Aukot, I don't want to give a blanket condemnation and say the Punguza Mzigo bill does not have anything good for Kenyans. We all appreciate the fact that, for example, the question of the wage bill, I mean, the already overburdened taxpayer is actually feeling the pain of continuing to actually shoulder all these wages for all our public servants today, because now it has become so big, yes, and some people argue it's not really necessary. The question, for example, why would you have a representation of say, even 17 lawmakers in Nairobi as a county, when you still have MCAs who have been elected and you still have MCAs who have been nominated? Yes. In the same county, you have that 17 elected members of parliament with a senator, we have a governor and a deputy governor, and still we have the national representation. So from our point of view is that maybe there's a way we need to think as a country that was it really necessary in the first place? Mm-hmm. This was a mistake we made as a country when we decided to go from the 210 initial constituencies to 290, yes, and now the additional women representative. Those are the pains that come with the current constitution that we have, and that is the reasoning behind people coming out with initiatives to see how we are going to cushion Kenyans, how we are going to move forward as a country. Because again, we are running this all affairs which really need money. But again, our economy is not really able to sustain all this. So I think it is a good initiative, only that you cannot just look onto the question of reducing the number of constituencies as the only alternative to really cushion the taxpayer. You know, it cannot be realistically possible, because again, you have to look at it broadly. What are other avenues? What are other things that we can do as a country to ensure that probably we reduce this wage bill? We see into it that there's proper representation at the same time, because you can think of reducing the wage bill, but again, you're compromising representation. So it is a good initiative. I mean, as Kenyans, we need really to look onto it and see what are the good things that we can adopt in this Punguza Mzigo initiative. I understand there's a BBI which was actually formed by President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
Product of the handshake.
Product of the handshake. These two initiatives, as they are now, because again, the information that is coming out, much as they have not even made open, they're documenting now the entire report. They'll be handing over to the two leaders. We anticipate highly that we are going to have a referendum. Why don't we sit down as Kenyans soberly and say, we have a BBI recommendations here, we have the Punguza Mzigo initiative here. How can we come together and try to reconcile these two aspects? What is it that maybe Ekuru Aukot has that maybe the BBI has not captured, and vice versa? You remember in when we are having the same constitution today, we had a section of leaders in this country really who opposed, and some Kenyans, actually a majority,
the no camp
and the yes camp, which was led, of course, the no camp was led by now Deputy President William Ruto. These people opposed to this constitution by virtue of having some elements they felt they needed to have been changed before we went to the plebiscite. But again, Kenyans, as we are known to them, and Raila Odinga having and others having convinced Kenyans that it is time to vote for this bill or this referendum, nobody really listened. That's why you see some people come out and say, because Raila Odinga has read this constitution, we have no choice but to vote for it because he does on our behalf. And that, I think, it is taking the same trajectory today. Raila Odinga himself is dismissing Ekuru Aukot's initiative and saying it is like nothing. Kenyans have to wait until the BBI report comes out. What is the rationale? That is what Kenyans are asking. It is all about the referendum.
Samuel Tawish, the ODM party has been very key and instrumental in terms of criticizing Ekuru Aukot's initiative. But then clearly when we see, even as we listen, when they are speaking publicly, we've had Honorable Orengo speak, we had the governor of Kisumu, Professor Nyong'o, during the funeral of his mother, speaking about a change of political system in the country, where he was saying it's only a parliamentary system that can save this country. All these talks geared or directed towards a change of constitution, a change, probably like you said, a likely referendum. The ODM camp, or the other camp on the other side, let me say the ODM camp, has also been calling for the reduction of this representation in terms of parliament and, county assemblies and so on and so forth. Are we saying the same thing in different languages? Is Ekuru Aukot speaking the same thing with a different language? Are the ODM speaking the same thing in a different language? And how does this, debate of the Punguza Mzigo initiative affect the 2022 politics generally?
You know what, Timothy, I mean, our leaders today really are more interested in what, the entire referendum push really captures for them. It's not more of the ordinary people. That is why today you see Ekuru Aukot and other leaders can disagree, simply because those on the other side really feel Ekuru Aukot's initiative doesn't really capture what maybe they want, or it does not really capture their interests.
So they want their interest
actually included, because now if you're talking about reducing the number of constituencies from the current 290 to 149, what is going to be the rationale for that? Which constituency are you going to remove and which one are you going to retain? So those are some of the challenges.
On the matter of demarcation, and we have to go back.
We have to go back to the demarcation process, which is also quite costly and a big responsibility on the side of the taxpayer, and also in terms of having another commission to carry out all this. But again, that said and done, Ekuru Aukot initiative is not that bad. It's only that you see most of the popular politicians, the high-profile politicians, including former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and others, have come out. By the way, just a point of correction, it's not only ODM which is coming out against this. We have also seen Wiper make an official statement about the Punguza Mzigo. They are saying they do not support it. They are only but waiting for the BBI. We've seen even Musalia Mudavadi and others come out. Even the leader of majority in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, has come out and said, I mean, the Punguza Mzigo bill does not capture the interest of most Kenyans, and according to them, they do not support it. So basically what I'm trying to say in essence is these politicians are opposed to this initiative merely because their interests are not really covered in this push.
It means that they know, some of them have an idea of what the BBI document is going to give us.
Remember the member
say talking about, hey, if we don't have a prime minister as head of government, then we won't have justice for all Kenyans and representation. I mean, such talks coming from someone like Duale, who is very key in the political scene in Kenya, and then we go back and then we hear someone like Orengo speak the same words, we have Nyong'o speak the same words. What is this telling us?
Well, Aden Duale is no ordinary politician. Aden Duale is a member of parliament. Aden Duale is a leader of majority for the ruling Jubilee party in the National Assembly. Is actually almost the fourth in the hierarchy of leadership in as far as government is concerned today in our country. And so when he speaks, anyone will be forgiven to conclude that he holds brief for either, for President Kenyatta. That is basically what it is, unless someone wants to convince us otherwise. As for James Orengo, we know is actually a staunch ally of ODM party leader Raila Odinga, and when he speaks, everyone feels like really speaking for Raila Odinga. Although at some point or sometimes you'll hear them try to dismiss and want to make it as though it's a personal opinion, but in most cases, anyone will view Orengo's views as maybe that of Raila Odinga's. It's very rare. You can hardly hear Orengo actually contradict Raila Odinga on anything. So when they speak, it's almost likely that they're speaking for these individuals. But again, the people who constitute the Building Bridges Initiative team are politicians themselves, you understand, mostly the politicians, and they have links and connections with all these politicians. So they sit and discuss every other time. They will leak this information. That's why we saw last time some of the newspapers attempted to give actually a sneak preview of what we should be expecting as Kenyans and as far as the BBI report is concerned. In fact, some people even said, some newspapers quoted that the report has already been handed over to the two leaders, which is not the case. So it tells you that what they're speaking is not out of the blues. It's something that they have an idea of. It's something that they have a clue of what exactly is contained. But largely you'll notice in all these two initiatives, the biggest thing is either to reduce or to ensure that we amend the leadership. It's not more really of cushioning the taxpayer in as far as the cost of living is concerned. For example, when Aden Duale speaks of having, for example, a post of prime minister being created and having two deputy prime ministers, that is what it means in essence. We are going to go back to where instead of having technocrats in cabinet, we are going to have politicians who are going to serve in cabinet. I think that is where we are looking onto. And we are also going to have probably, if what is being said is anything to go by, that we are going to have regional leaders, 14 for that matter, to actually replace the current county governors that we have. And so the governors who are serving their second term in office, and they feel like they may not have another chance, or they may not have another room to actually practice politics or to be in leadership, they are going to take advantage of these initiatives and actually support. If this initiative really captures that we are going to have, for example, Mombasa as a region. So for somebody like Amason Jeffa Kingi, or Ali Hassan Joho, or you go to Western, you have Oparanya, or you go to, say, the Rift Valley, you have the likes of Nanok, or even Tunai, they will always feel like we should have this plebiscite actually passed, so that at least some of us can get an opportunity to serve as regional kingpins in these places.
Leading to that, there's one very key, prominent politician who was quoted recently, alluding to the fact that when an MP is a minister, then there is accountability, because this person comes to the House regularly and can be scrutinized and can also be updating the Parliament and the nation more often. That is their justification for going back to the parliamentary system, where we have MPs sitting in as ministers as well. That's politicians sitting in as ministers. And they dismiss the notion that, you know, politicians cannot run government, that it's not only technocrats that can run government, but which I, to some degree, agree, because when the Jubilee administration was coming into power, there was the promise of not including politicians. But look at the cabinet right now. Najib Balala, we have Mwangi Kinjuri, we have all these people back inside the cabinet. What is happening?
Well, one thing we have to clarify to the viewer is not that we having the likes of Balala, the likes of Ngilu, the others who are actually in politics before, Ababu Namwamba, Rachel Shebesh, and now in cabinet, are not actually in active politics. But now the BBI proposal, I suppose, is that we should have politicians who are actively in office, those who are members of parliament, or even whether it is the National Assembly or the Senate, serving at that particular moment, actually also serving or doubling up as ministers in cabinet. But when I look at the argument being advanced by the proponents of the BBI initiative, that if having the elected individuals, those who are MPs, serving as ministers at the same time, that it increases level of accountability. I do not think really that argument holds any water. Why am I saying so? Because again, today, much as we have technocrats as ministers, whenever necessary, whenever wanted, you'll always see MPs actually summon these ministers to come and shed more light on 1, 2, 3 things regarding their ministries or regarding their portfolios. We've seen them actually summoning these, CSS every now and then. So it cannot be that when you have these lawmakers actually on the floor of the House, is the only moment that we can actually see the accountability that they're purporting to actually advance. So those reasons not really, the excuse is not really viable. It's not enough, convincing enough for the ordinary Kenyan to understand why you will tell us it's better, or you are going to have more accountability if you have this, if you are to have these individuals in parliament as compared to have technocrats who are not politicians at all. Because when you come to ministers, it has nothing really to do with politics. They're saying that they're detached with people, they do not understand them, they feel like politicians understand the needs of the people more than the technocrats. But again, these technocrats are Kenyan citizens. They come from, they come from these places. They understand the challenges that people actually go through.
But Stawish, that is actually my argument, because see this, even those politicians who are now in cabinet, seemingly, like you're saying, not in active politics, yes, they're not in active politics, but look at how some of them ended up in cabinet. It is because they vied and they did not make it. So they were awarded positions in government, and to be very precise, some positions were created by the president which were never even existent. We have like the positions that, what do we call them? The ACS, or what do we call these positions?
Or the ACS,
the likes. I mean, there was a lot of, hue and cry in the country of what really is the, is the purpose. It's like duplication of duties, because we have the CS, we have the PS, and then we have, the heads of departments. Still, my argument, we still have politicians, and these, as much as we may want to say that they are not active in politics, to be very honest, when you listen to them in some rallies where they go, they're just politicians. I mean, they're just playing politics, and they're party members. How can we term them as not active? Or is it active in terms of, sitting in parliament and sitting in, do we term active as just sitting in parliament?
Well, active being actually, you represent a given constituency. You have a particular interest. That is what I suppose active in politics really means. Because if you have a lawmaker who is actually in office, for instance today, he has some interest. He has to attend to the interests of his constituents, the people who elected him. And that is what necessarily, I believe so in my own opinion, what being active in politics means. But again, if you have a technocrat, a person who has just been appointed from nowhere, or somebody really but has the qualification and suitability to serve in that particular portfolio, he has no particular interest whatsoever. His interest is to serve in cabinet and to ensure he serves the people equally, because again, he does not have any interest in as far as that portfolio is concerned, and I believe that is what it means. But that said and done, looking onto a situation today as Kenya, you've actually alluded to the fact that we have most politicians now who are serving in this cabinet. You know, we cannot run away from it, because getting into this cabinet position is not more of qualification and suitability only, is also about how well you're connected with the individuals or the appointing authority. As for Kenyan case today, I also heard you actually castigate and say probably what was the necessity of creating these other extra positions. You know, it is the prerogative, much as Kenyans hold different view about this, it is the prerogative of the president, after having been elected and sworn into office, to reorganize his government the way he feels it, to create and name portfolios the way he feels it. I mean, that is the prerogative of the president, and we can't change that.
Sure.
And that is why you see the constitution has only but given him the minimum requirement in as far as the people who are supposed to be appointed to cabinet. 14 in our Kenyan case as a minimum and 22 as maximum. Yes. He can decide to have 14 and not 22. Or he can decide to give us the entire 22. He can decide to have, like, for example, we have the PS today. Again, we have the ACS that we talked about. Yes. So all these kinds of things is actually the prerogative of the president, and the constitution really allows him to do this, to reorganize as he deems it fit for him to really run the affairs of this country very well, at least according to the president, or according to the party that is in power at that particular moment. And so, I mean, I may be sharing the similar views, that having some of this position was not necessarily a good thing. It was just heaping more burden to the taxpayers. Yeah. Because again, what is it that the CAS can do that the PS cannot do? Still, we have the ministers, yes, and we have advisors as well to these ministers. We have directors. We have directors
in their respective positions.
So it's a very honest conversation that we need to have as Kenyans. That do we really need this? Do we really need to have maybe, say, for example, a CS who is deputized by a PS, and still you have an administrative, is called what?
ACS.
ACS. Because again, you'll understand, there are some ministries also that have more than one PS. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, yes.
For example, when you come to the interior docket, we have 2 PSs. You go to another one. So it's a very big burden on the taxpayer, whereas these ministries or these individuals, we can only have a minister. Go to developed countries, for example, you will find, for example, in US, you will find actually one minister holding a very big portfolio.
Yes.
And we don't even have all these assistants, we don't have all these directors, but for Kenyan case, we even a smaller population rather, but we're having a very big representation. But it's more of really accommodating these people and ensuring at least they have a job. That is why you see most of the people who have been appointed to these offices were somehow politicians, or they were aspiring to become politicians in one way or another.
Let me challenge that school of thought, Samuel. If we want to create positions so that we can create jobs for politicians who fell during the elections, what message are we sending out to Kenyans? Because look at the Punguza Mzigo initiative. Yeah. The Punguza Mzigo initiative is actually trying to unload the burden, trying to remove the burden from the taxpayer. But then when we create things like cabinet and create other positions to try and create jobs for other people, look at the naming of the heads of parastatals that happened the other day. I mean, it was, I don't want to use any words, but I lack words to actually say that. But when you look at the awarding of positions, the chairmen and directors sitting in those parastatals, it was purely politicians. Yeah. And what message are we sending? Are we telling Kenyans that it is okay to create jobs for your friends, as opposed to creating positions for service delivery? Now, having said that, as you talk about that, I would like also to you to join that with the matter that Okuru Okot was speaking about. You know, the court now having, you know, the petitions or the injunction that are being put on this case, we are finding that Okot is accusing this of tampering with constitutional timelines. Yeah. Because right now, they're supposed to take the bill round, and then county assemblies are supposed to discuss this, and then it's going to go to another level and another level. Maybe if you can just bring this to the understanding of our viewer. What does this entail? And when he speaks about constitutional timelines for this particular one, what is he talking about?
You know what, Timothy? Okuru Okot is actually is an astute lawyer. Actually, Ekuru Aukot was one of those leaders in this country who participated in the formation or the creation of the constitution that we have today.
The committee of experts.
Yeah, the committee of experts. Ekuru Aukot, I think, was the secretary.
Yes.
Actually was a member of that particular committee. So he understands this constitution too well. But again, you know, we cannot operate like a banana republic. You know, if everyone who feels dissatisfied with the ruling or verdict given by the court can decide to do things the way they want, then we'll not have a country. That's why you see sometimes people have been castigating the executive, castigating, leaders, the president at some point, and saying, why is it that we are not following the law? You've even seen the betting companies, the story that you ran, betting companies going to court and saying KRA decided to shut down the operation, freeze the account simply because they did not actually consider the fact that there was a court order. So we do not want to have that precedent. We do not have we don't want to make that as normal business. That anyone can defy a court order and they feel like it is a normal thing. Because again, if Ekuru Aukot really feels dissatisfied, as he has expressly put it, the only avenue he has is to go and challenge the same in a competent court, to go back to the courts and try to seek more clarification and oppose the same in a court of law. You cannot go out there. And I believe, even I remember last time, you remember what happened in this country when we were having a repeat election.
Yes.
I mean, Honorable Raila Odinga decided to pull out of the election altogether. Although Raila also did it just technically, he did not actually write to IEBC, but he announced in a press conference that I pulled out. But you see, there are laws that govern. That if you're pulling out of an election, then you have to do what? Apply to the IEBC, inform them officially that you are pulling out of an election. But you see, IEBC went again and included Raila Odinga's name in the ballot where we had him in that second election. So we do not want this country actually to be run like we are not governed by rule of law. So Ekuru Aukot may be justified. His whatever kind of things is putting forth that probably this judge or the court did not actually adjudicate this matter well, then he has to go back to the same courts and try to get more clarification or even appeal that ruling. You cannot go around or defy a court order. What is it that, what will we have of a country if every Kenyan, an ordinary person who has been accused or a verdict has been given and they defy simply because they feel it was not deserving for them? You see, it's going to be a big challenge for this country. Yesterday we had another ruling, Martha Karua versus Anne Mungi. Anne Mungi, you know, she made that clarification. She does not want to be called Waiguru anymore. I beg your pardon. So you might be very careful about that. I apologize. So, I mean, Martha Karua being a lawyer, we know, and understanding the law very clearly, after the ruling came out and said she's not really happy with the ruling that has been given by the judges in the Supreme Court. But again, she has no alternative, she has no choice but to abide by it. We remember even in 2013, Raila Odinga coming out saying, we do not actually agree with this ruling, but we have to abide by it. There's nothing we can do. I mean, we have to be governed by rule of law. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that in as much as Ekuru Aukot may be having issues with that verdict, the only way he can challenge the same is not through political forums, but to go back to the same courts and seek a further clarification or appeal the same. So that is the only thing he can do. As for the question you have asked regarding the appointment superstatals, that we have more politicians, I mean, Kenyans have always wanted that. There are so many youth, young people who are educated, people who are qualified, people who can serve competently in some of these offices, who should otherwise be appointed. But we're having a challenge of a leadership that seems less sensitive to matters regarding the youth. And that is why you see they give priorities to those they perceive their friends or people whom they have served with at some point in their political career. That's why you see there's almost a recycling habit that we are having in this country in as far as appointment to these officers are concerned, where you have individuals who served at least as politicians or ministers being recycled, given different portfolios. In fact, you remember when President Kenyatta actually restructured the cabinet last time, I mean, after he was sworn in for a second term, the individuals who are serving in those portfolios, whom Kenyans really had issues with, and as far as competence and integrity is concerned, were not actually relieved their ministerial posts and told to go home. They were given other portfolios. Some were appointed as ambassadors. So what does it tell you? Are these the only qualified individuals? It does tell you that politicians will only but try to go the route of those they perceive as their friends, people whom they have identified with at some point in their political career, which is a very unfortunate thing.
And another question, Tawish. looking at the way appointments are being done in these parastatals, and it's funny because you mentioned the youth. I'll give you an example of a youth, but then my question is, are these parastatals, you know, just a bedrock for politicians? Is it where politicians go to rest or go to launch their political ambition? Because look at someone like Jaguar, who is now sitting in parliament. The first time we saw Jaguar actually assuming a government appointment, you know, a government position was when he was appointed to Nakada, right? But then after that, right now he's in Bunge as a member of parliament. So it is either they come from the parastatals to Bunge or they come from Bunge to the parastatals. Is it a culture that is being created in Kenya that as long as you are serving in government, then there's this political awarding by the government of the day to its cronies and its allies?
You know what, Timothy, once you get elected or you get into some of these offices, mostly government offices, it's like you get a new baptism altogether. It's like there's a new thing that is being actually inculcated in you. That's why you see people who have served as, for example, politicians, maybe as MPs or even governors, or those who have served in these government offices, always feel like they have to be close to the system. They have to be close to government.
Is it globally, or is it just a Kenyan culture?
Not necessarily. It's not limited to Kenya only. I believe it's something that cuts across, for example, the African continent. It's something that is so common now in the African continent, where you'll find so many people who have been elected into this or appointed into these offices, at least in one way or another, they are involved in politics. But again, we have to give credit where it's due, because for President Kenyatta, for example, today, we have cabinet ministers who are serving today, and those who are serving in some of the parastatals today who are not necessarily politicians, and who are actually executing their jobs without necessarily connecting to politics that we have today.
Political interests.
The problem we have today as a country is that we have individuals even who have been appointed to cabinet or are appointed to these portfolios who are not supposed to be active in politics. They're supposed just to do their job as prescribed by the Constitution, but they are actively also involved in the politics that we have today. A case in point is Mwangi Kiunjuri, for example, the Minister for Agriculture, I believe. He's been going around at some point also trying to, speak about the 2022 succession politics and all those kinds of things. So how can Kenyans really have trust in future? Because we are setting a very bad culture, like you're putting it, where we feel like once you've been appointed into this office, you only but have to execute your mandate as required by the Constitution, and you have to actually alienate yourself from active politics. But that is not what we are having today. That is not what we are witnessing today. Most of these people will really want to play politics. I believe even though some of the people who are ministers today, or those who are serving as PSS or parastatal chiefs, in 2022 you will see them actually on ground. If they have lost this other position, they will be going back to the ground to seek elective posts. Those who are in elective posts and going to lose in this coming election, they will be appointed again into these parastatals and ministerial positions. It's become a culture. It's become like a culture, unfortunately.
Quite a bad culture, I would say.
One.
Samuel Tawish,
Yeah.
let me drift away a little bit. Politicians allied to the famous Tanga Tanga team don't seem to have a lot of problems with the Okot camp, especially those who are not privy or are not, friendly to the handshake. They have no problem whatsoever with the Okot camp. What is this telling us?
Well, you know what these politicians are doing is not necessarily identifying with Okot's bill. It is just trying to play antagonistic politics, because apparently Raila Odinga, whom maybe they do not subscribe to his politics or to his ideology, is against the Ekuru Okot's initiative, and so it is just natural for people who oppose Raila Odinga, for example, to support the Ekuru Okot's bill, because Raila Odinga has come out openly and actually opposed the Punguza Mzigo initiative. So that tells you that sometimes we do not really oppose or support these initiatives out of necessity or out of we feel it is the right thing to do. It's because who is in that camp, who is supporting this idea and who is not supporting this
whether
idea.
it fits you or not.
Yeah, and that's what the problem we have even today, even the current BBI that we are having today. If at all there are any issues regarding this BBI, or if you're going to go to a referendum, the people who support Raila Odinga, because now he's openly said he's supporting the BBI recommendations, whatever kind of recommendations that are going to come out of the BBI, are going to support that initiative blindly without really reading it and understanding it, and tomorrow they'll start actually crying again. The people who do not, who subscribe, for example, to President Kenyatta's political ideology will support whatever kind of route he will take, just like he has done with the handshake today. I mean, even the people who are supporting Raila Odinga, they were not supporting President Kenyatta.
But now they're fully behind the president.
They have become the key lieutenants of President Kenyatta. Why? Because their master, their general, has had a handshake with the president, and they're actually reading from the same script, and so it is just natural for them to support. So those are the problems that we are having. These individuals are not supporting or opposing these initiatives simply because they are out of place, but because who is spearheading that?
So pros and cons, because I mean, it's a good thing if a party leader gives a directive and the party is able to be whipped behind him and to follow his lead. I mean, that creates a stable political environment. But then we have a situation where some politicians, like right now, I'm sorry to say this, but again, the Tanga team, the president time and time again says, no politicking, let's talk about development, let's do work. But then you find there's another camp that is always politicking, and they're always talking about the 2022 succession politics. Is it right to say that even the BBI is all about Raila and Uhuru and not Kenyans, as much as we would also want to say that, you know, the Okot camp or the Tanga team is only about the leaders of the factions or the leaders of the parties?
Like I said before, Timothy, all these initiatives is more of interest for the politician. It's not about the ordinary mwananchi. And it's just a matter of time before we see what the BBI really has for Kenyans. You will see when this report is out, something that is going to gain momentum and I mean popularity is actually the question of how we are going to expand, for example, executive, so that we can have these individuals or some of these individuals actually come into place. It's not, it really has nothing or less really to do with the ordinary mwananchi, unfortunately. And it's a very dangerous trend we are setting as a country or even as a continent if we are going to have our priorities actually directed only to the leadership, directed to the people who are getting into these offices, and not how we are going to help the ordinary people, at least so that they can even just get food on their table. It's not really living the luxurious life that we are seeing with maybe these leaders. It's just about getting that small thing. It's just about getting the basics. It's just making sure that the cost of living is not that painful on them, making sure that we have jobs for our youth, making sure that we empower our people. I mean, it is not really geared towards that, and it's just a matter of time, and you are going to see what the BBI recommendation is going to come up with. Most of the things really may be there, but as a bait for you to actually have a reason to wake up and go and vote for this, I mean, proposal, because again, they have to give you at least a small bait, just like what Kura Okot is doing. When you know, go and tell an ordinary person at home that, you know, we having this problem, the cost of living is so high because we having so many people representing us at the executive or even at the parliament. The only way out is for us to reduce the number of these people so that we can, but again, they will always find avenues. Today, even if you reduce that number to 10, I'm telling you 100%, these individuals, the cost of living in any circumstance, I do not see like the cost of living is going to drastically come down anytime soon. Simply because we have reduced the number, the number of representatives in the National Assembly or the Senate or the executive per se. So it is a very big challenge we are having. But moving forward where we are today, you remember 2010 when we voted for this constitution, it was touted as one of the most progressive constitutions we have in the world.
Yes.
And we are so much excited when voting and having this new constitution sworn in. I remember I was with you at the Bomas of Kenya. The promulgation of the constitution. I was with you. Really, the promulgation was done at Guru Park.
The Yashpal guys and the
national tallying for the referendum itself was done at the Bomas of Kenya. I remember we were there actually almost 2 days. Camping there too.
We are reporting on those are the good old days.
The good old days. days. So, I mean, people were excited.
Yes.
People felt like now this is the answer to everything that we are having.
Yeah.
And it came out clearly after some time, now with the implementation of this new constitution, that even some of the people who really were advocates or proponents, those who actively supported this constitution, did not understand it too well. You had people who are lawyers, people who are seasoned politicians, who instead of going to vie for governor positions at the county level, decided to go to the Senate because they felt they are going to be the upper house, they're going to be seniors, more resources are going to be channeled to the Senate actually to try and monitor the counties, but that was not the case. That is why you see they were at loggerheads with the county chiefs every other time, and most of them who are serving as senators, they have gone back and vied for this other position of governorship at the county level. It tells you that in the first place, they didn't quite understand. We were just passing this constitution out of euphoria. That does not mean that the constitution in generality did not have anything good for Kenyans. Devolution is the best thing that ever happened to this country. I mean, leadership has been taken to the grassroots. Resources have been trickled to the grassroots. The only challenge we are having is that we have equally devolved corruption from the national government to the devolved governments. And that is why you see now, there's no accountability. You'll ask yourself the question, why will the people of Turkana, for example, die today of hunger or lack of water, when you have a county government that really knows the priorities for a county government, county government of Turkana, and resources have already been given to that particular county. Like, for example, 10 billion every financial year. What is it that is so difficult, for example, for Governor Nanok to sit down with the people, public participation, and ask them, what is it that we can do? Surprisingly,
this is the second term we are serving under the new dispensation. So we are talking about
almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. Yeah. By 2022 will be 2022 will be 10 years.
10 years.
Having had 2 elections after the
promulgation of the
new constitution.
Now the question is, like you mentioned, 8 years is not enough to start up an irrigation project that can actually bring, food to such places, to come up with maybe a business venture or a development project that can allow people of Turkana to have a good life. But as we conclude, Tavish, what's the way forward in terms of, is our problem a document or is our problem ethical?
I think it's a combination of both factors. One, we have a problem with the document itself. There are some areas which, gray. The learned friends will tell you there's a lacuna in law. There are some gaps that we really need to fill. But again, we also have that lack of, obligation to really live by the constitution we have. Because when you have individuals who openly defy court orders, for example, who do not live by the constitution, yet this is a document that is supposed to guide our day-to-day life. If you're having a country without really the constitution, without the law, or not being governed by law, then everyone will just do things the way they deem.
There's lack of ethics.
There's lack of ethics. Then that becomes a very big challenge for our country. So we want, first of all, in as much as we are advocating for, or we support that we need some changes in our constitution, we also think that it is time Kenyans really live up to that morality of abiding and living by our constitution. Because it can never be right that we advocate for a change of the constitution, that we say we want a new document, or we really need this constitution, but we do not want to live by it. It's going to be very dangerous for this country when any other person or every person feels like they can do things the way they feel. It's not about how the law really requires us to do. So much as we are going to do this, and I'm sure that even this new constitution, these changes of the constitution is going to go through, with the support of Raila Odinga. That's the reality. I can't sit here and cheat you that probably this constitution is not going to pass through unless a miracle happens, like what happened in 2005 when you had the opposition actually defeat a sitting president, Mwai Kibaki, then when we had the Orange and Banana, you remember, and Orange actually defeating Banana. Which
ironically, the two leaders were still on the same side. Raila and Uhuru
were on the same camp.
And right now, Raila is in the opposition, and Uhuru is running the state machinery, and they have the support.
But they read from the same script. Remember during the funeral what he said in Bomet? Yeah, he said Honorable Deputy President and President Kenyatta were actually the founders of ODM party. What does it tell you? It means we will always, actually, this is like a conveyor belt. We will always go back where we came from. But at some point, these people served in Kanu, they served in ODM.
I think in the words of Mzee Moi, that KANU itaongoza Kenya miaka 100.
Yeah.
So we are yet to see that. But Samuel Tawish, thank you very much for coming and honoring our invitation, and thank you very much for helping us shed light on this topic. Viewer, we have come to the end of this segment. Thank you very much for staying tuned. You can keep the conversation going on hashtag GBS Morning Extra. You can also watch this very episode on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and you can also send us a short SMS on 21144. Our guest today in studio was Samuel Tawish, a political commentator and analyst, and I'm really glad that he was here with us today, and we want to call you here more often.
My pleasure.
Your presence here reminds me of those good old days, like you're mentioning, the Bombers, when you could spend like more than 3 days at Bombers of Kenya waiting for the results and all that stuff. And that actually brings us to the end of this segment. My director is telling me that our time is up. Thank you very much, viewer, for staying tuned. We now pave way for the Sports Extra with Kevin Nyariki that comes to you shortly after this break. My name is Timothy Amondi. Do have yourself a lovely day. Bye-bye for now.